do all that crazy shit that I never would have done, because I realized at a young age that I loved to write, but I had nothing to say. So
Wow.
I discovered journalism, where they just pointed you and said, "Oh, go tell about this," and then you could like fucking learn it, and then you could, be the voice of authority. Um,
Fuck.
this we have
Fucked up,
this
fucked
great,
up voice of authority, yeah?
yeah.
Love it.
Well, we had this great. I'm sure you know of Roseanne, the American comedian who's like kind of a nutcase a little bit. Roseanne Barr. She's a comedian. Anyway,
I'll check her
um,
out.
I wrote a great story about her multiple personality disorder in one of my books.
Oh,
It's
really?
called Revenge of the Donut Boys. It's like the first story in the on the album, and but she's like, so many people I've met are like, they're geniuses, and so they're like crazy and they don't fit in either, like they just don't fit in. And she was one of the
Fuck.
most brilliant people I ever met. And she actually said the most like sort of concise thing to me. I spent like 4 months like following her around, from time to time. We
Stalker.
would get Well, no, I was allowed to be with her, but what I was angling for was for her to sit down and let me meet all of her alternative personalities, her multiple personalities. I like talked to her shrink. This was actually a thing. It was like just a thing. It was like fucking interesting. And finally, after the 4 months, I got her comfortable enough to sit down with me and let me meet them. Like, could I meet them now? And we
Well,
sat
you
down
yeah.
and we met them. So she was like totally, there was like a baby, there was like a teenager, there was like a butch, there was like all these different people. But the thing is like some of the shit she told me was like the wisest shit ever. So what she told me about me was, she just looked at me one time and she said, "You have to be the one who knows. You have to be the one who knows." And that's kind of like, I do. I like, I like learning the shit, and then like knowing about it and then telling about it in a way that I feel is like searching for the truth, like in a way, and that's like what
Well,
all this
yeah.
stuff is. And um, the rest of it's like, it's a lot of fun to do it, but it's always been in service for me of servicing my keyboard, because I'm a keyboard player. Deep down, I just like, where I really get my bang is not from tromping out in the wilderness and doing these things, but more like, although, living with a crack gang, doing all the stuff I've done, even like hanging out with like the red the red states in America, in the guise of like America's most distinguished rodeo cowboy, and in Texas, and being with all these Trumpers and all that stuff. It's sort of like being an anthropologist and embedding yourself in different parts of society, where you have to like wrap your head around the way that different people have like all these crazy different points of view.
Mm.
So, and that's just like, to me, that's like, so that's given me like the time to come back here into my place and chew it all over and add it to like my consciousness of how I view the world. So, that's kind of how the work goes. It's kind of like my experiences, having the experiences, and then like having to be able to tell about it. And everyone says, if you want to know a subject, you have to kind of be able to teach it. So, like, that's what
Yes.
writing these stories is like.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the fact that the typewriter is your keyboard. I'm not a musician, but I've worked in the industry, humping road cases for the last 10 years, and I felt a bit left out because I don't strum a guitar, I don't play in a band, but I write, and these fingers here, are writing, lyrics, tunes, strumming guitars, whatever. And that's what writers are. They're playing a keyboard.
Well, um, like I like to joke around that writers are people who saw their byline published for the first time and never got over it. But I think
Brilliant.
the truth is that's kind of like the shallow version. The deeper version is um, writers are people who kind of think they have like they're special and have something to say. Like, and maybe nobody else feels the same way about them, but like we feel that. We feel a need to like say what we have to say. And of course, we think we know what we're talking about. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there. But I think that's what really unites all writers. Like, we have a point of view and we like have the sort of balls to kind of like foist it on other people. And so
I like
that's
that
why,
word
hence,
voice.
and that's why there's like so many like interesting sort of personalities in the writer community, not all of whom you really would wish to be with. So you want to read them, but you necessarily don't want to be with them. And
Yeah, because it's like looking at yourself in the mirror, I suppose. It's
and
like,
then and then out there, I have other writers who, like, I get with them, and it's like falling into their arms of your soulmate. You know what I mean? Like you need to like have someone who gets you. Like, I get how like fucking crazy you are. Like I once had a girlfriend. We were living in the Lower East Side of New York, and she's actually it's like 30 years, 25 years later, whatever. She's working with me in my book company as a copy editor. She used to be the chief copy editor at Rolling Stone. She's great. Anyway, before we broke up. We were crossing. Probably on the way to breaking up because we were crossing Houston Street, in the Lower East Side, and we were having this argument, and she said, "Nothing to you is insignificant," and it's kind of like that's how I look at life. Like nothing is insignificant,
yeah.
and I, but you have to like keep your eyes open, kind of, and your mouth shut, and like to
Great
take it in.
advice. And I have problems with that because I just love the sound of my own voice.
Well, there's this point at which you're like stimulated by interesting things. And I see this today with like students a lot, especially since we've gone into this era where you're like zooming. So everybody's like, you see the class, but they're all at a keyboard. And then, so if you're like stimulating them, then when they all start doing like this and they don't pay attention to you anymore. So like like stimulation in our world today leads to the need um, to express the effects of the stimulation. And a lot of people are like that, and you have a lot of ideas, and you also like want to be heard, and like how many people get heard in the course of every day, and
No one. Where the ignored. There's a great book, I think, called The Ignored, and I've sort of referred to a friend of mine who was a book reviewer, and it's a great book because it goes into these people who are doing things and totally under the radar, ignored.
well, but this is the thing. It's like, all right, so like 20, 30 years ago, I'm like one of the, 50 people in New York who are like the top magazine writers, blah, 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 and it's New York City, the center of the media universe. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you've ever been to New York, but like one of the characteristics of New York in those days, besides being a lot dirtier than it is today, there was a magazine, a news kiosk on like almost like every
I know
corner,
those
every other
news
corner.
kiosks. We used to
And it
have
was
them in
like,
the city.
yeah, and it was like this big thing, and it had on the back wall was like every fucking important magazine that mattered, right? And then along the front was like every newspaper that mattered. Le Monde, like the New York Times, the Washington Post, like all that shit, International Herald Tribune, that was all there. So it's kind of like in those days, you could look in that one news kiosk and you could understand the whole world of media and what was important. And then since the internet has come along, it's created all these micro communities of participation so that like this corner of the universe knows about you, but nobody else gives a shit. You know what I mean? It's like, but that's what's also interesting because I can have books that have been published since, 2000 and they get new readers all the time because there's like all these new
My hands
people
up.
always able to find it.
My hands up. I didn't
So
even know about you before, because I didn't have access to the Rolling Stones US version. And I wasn't one for buying these glossy publications. I was only one for getting published in them. I am Ivan Thomas Braselic, by the way. That's who I really am. Here
Ivan,
Broncos. Yeah, Bronco Jones, apparently, another one of my many names. Frank Russell, Jack Russell, Vanya Vita. Yeah, it's a play upon Danny DeVito, who I really adore as an actor. It's kind of like
how are you spelling Vanya? Vana?
yeah, something like that. It's just something I need to quick.
Something like that. I love it. This is my name, but I don't know how to spell it.
Yeah, I mean, every time I'm like putting a new book in, it's like, how the fuck do I spell Vito? Is it V?
So where are you right now?
I'm actually in Brisbane right now. And I was always Ivan the Terrible. Yeah, I was traveling doing my roadkill tour. Left in May, pretty much raced out of every established place from gyms to gyms where I used to park my car and sleep. And I said, fuck it. I said, I'm going to go explore. I'm heading north. This is in Perth. So I had a bicycle and I locked it up against a fence for anyone to take, or I could access it when I got back. And I just started going north in this car. I had a Hyundai and I ended up doing a Z across the continent and caused a lot of trouble in Coffs Harbour and did my, LA Confidential thing covering potential, I don't know, pedophile crime, which I think it wasn't. It was a setup by these greedy hotel owners. And then I managed to just sort of land in Brisbane, where I was here 30 years ago. Queerland, we used to joke. It's Queerland. But it was actually the land of Joe Biolki Peterson. Don't you worry about that. And that's what he used to say. And it's good to be back. Good to be home.
Yeah, I mean that's really my the place I spent the most time in Australia was in Brisbane. I told you I was God, what was his name? Trev the Dev. Trevor something. He was a dwarf. He was famous. He was famous all across Australia and even like in England. He went to England to battle other dwarfs, and he was working with a Mr. America, a former Mr. Australia, I think he was, a muscle guy.
Yeah.
And the muscle guy would like throw him. He had a harness, and it was called dwarf tossing. And I remember I spent a bunch of time. I guess there was some promoter guy down on like, isn't there this strip of bars in Brisbane?
I think
Like,
Fortitude Valley. Then you got the Gold Coast nearby, right? I thought that'd be
yeah,
right.
yeah, that's where we were. And I had a good time. I stayed in a condo for like 2 weeks. Those like weird fucking things on the beach, those blue bottle things or whatever they are.
Oh man, they whip up as you run and they really poison you basically.
Yeah, yeah. I
Before you
remember
know it,
that.
you get a heart attack.
I liked it. In fact, yeah, like shout out to that copy editor I just spoke of, Tish. She went with me on that trip. So we
Wow.
had a good 2 weeks down in Brisbane and Sydney and the Gold
Well,
Coast.
that was the psych of Australia. It's long,
Well,
long
I
gone.
kind of live on the coast myself now, so
Yeah,
I like the ocean.
whereabouts are you based? I know you did tell me, but I might as well ask
It's
you.
San Diego. It's a little community called La Jolla, which is kind of an older community, which might have been founded kind of by like Hollywood types who came down here for, I guess, cheaper coastline. I don't know.
You
But
are
we're like
Hollywood
20,
type. You are
20,
Hollywood.
Well, no,
Hollywood,
I'm like,
San
no, that's why I
Diego.
live in San Diego because, it's the poor man's version of Malibu. It's
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? How long does it take to drive from San Diego to LA, and what's the distance in kilometers or miles for our listeners
yeah.
there?
The what I usually say is anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, depending on what time you go.
Oh
But
shit!
it's like 130 miles. I'm not sure what that is in kilometers.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more, 1.5 times that. But it's like if you go at the right times of day, it's like a 5 or 6 lanes the whole way, and you're going like 80 or 90 miles an hour. And so it's like you go the wrong time of day or the weekend, and it's just like you're stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. It's really bad on
Yeah, I
my
mean, I'm sort of gonna. What about all right from San Diego to Tijuana? Give us some measurements and time.
29 miles.
Wow, I've got a good friend, by the way. Hi, Mark Rogers, who based in Rosarito, I think,
Mhm.
where he writes a lot of his novels or sets them
Yeah,
in.
it's kind of just below the border here. You can like park your car and walk across. I'm not a big Mexico fan. I don't know, like it's cheap and all that stuff, but I have this like there's been times when I've like been living with a crack gang, and then I went straight from there to staying in like some fancy hotel in Hollywood, and living with them for 3 weeks, and then like it's like being in your car out in the outback. I'm like at some cheap motel down there. I'm like living in all these circumstances that I've lived in, and then like I go to the expensive place, and it's a little bit like like a little bit too much for me to deal with. So I kind of like the like a more down atmosphere in that regard.
What do you mean down more opulent, safe?
No, no, more like less opulent, more like basic. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see the ocean from where I am, but I don't have like a palace or anything. I just have like a basic house.
Yeah, I remember going through San Diego. I was traveling the States around 1994, and I think the closest I got to Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter Thompson was I was in Denver getting my ticket back to Australia. But what I remember about San Diego most was white. It's just like Art Deco white. And then Los Angeles is like 1930s, these Art Deco buildings that went up forever. You're talking about like these classic, iconic buildings in New York. So it's interesting about LA. What I thought was the most interesting part were these.
LA's got a lot more history in it than San Diego. I mean, San Diego has history, of course, but LA is like the more substantial place and San Diego is like a really nice place
Yeah,
where like has grown up here because the Navy came here because it was like the Navy always finds the best places to be. Those admirals want their golf course in the nicest vested place. So that's kind of where San Diego came from. Was this is the home of the Pacific Fleet. So it used to be San Diego was all about you know sailors and all that stuff. And then
huh.
later on, then about the same time, this Hollywood people came down here and made like founded an enclave here. And then there started to be like businesses growing up here, aerospace industry, and it somehow along the way it became big in biotech. So there's a lot of science and drugs and development, and Qualcomm is a big internet,
Interesting you talk about
phone.
that because I'm actually on Saxena at the moment. Took an injection shot in my fat, my love handles, and I've been on phentermine, which I may have told you for on and off for a little while. Then I was on Vyvanse. I had to see a psychiatrist for that, and apparently I had schizophrenia. I had to pretend I had that anyway. It's just one of my many personalities. But the Vyvanse I was on 40 milligrams, and they give it to children who've got ADHD. They start 30 milligrams. I was off my fucking tree for a little while, but all in the name of combating fat, it just sort of crept up on me. And they say that if you're obese, you're going to die from 15 different cancers. Your knee's going to, it's going to just collapse on you. All this was happening to me. You're going to have heart problems. You're going to have circulation problems. And with, losing weight, diet alone won't help. You need chemicals. We have
Do you do exercise?
Yeah, I do a fair bit of that. And I had problems because of a bad knee from overweight. So I was in the wilderness for
So how much weight have you lost?
Well, good question. I lost, I was about 111 kgs or 112, depending on how much milk I drank. And I dropped down to 95 at my best on Vyvanse. But I'm now 100. And for 5 months, I've not really been taking many chemicals because I got banned. I nearly got sectioned in Coffs Harbour. That's a really interesting story. Well,
speed makes you like schizophrenic. So,
there you go. That's right. Well, I definitely.
That's how they discovered schizophrenia and started the study of it. Was after World War II, when they were like just handing out speed like crazy to the soldiers and the truckers, and you could buy it you could buy speed everywhere, and that's how doctors actually developed a science that made them understand schizophrenia and all of these things like that. So speeds like will do that to you. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend less carbs and sugar.
Yes, and exercise.
That's it, period.
Yeah. Well, this Saxena.
I'm 66.
Yeah, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. And, I think hormones are good. Also, you might have a little thyroid deficiency. You should see a doctor, get some blood work.
Yeah, this is it. I've actually discovered through my own sort of self-medication and Google, sort of Dr. Google, that I've got low testosterone, right? So I told this to my doctor in Coffs Harbour, Dr. Wisno or something, and I was supposed to get a prescription for my Vyvanse because I was in a different state, different laws. And God bless his soul, he said, you know what? We don't know who you are, what you are. You better voluntarily admit yourself at the local base hospital. I go, yeah, oh, great. Then I'll be able to get on disability pension, I'll be signed off, I'll be taken care of. I go there, and there's a long line, and there's a guy dying of cancer. Another guy got his leg, just about amputated. He's about to die. Tragic stories. And I said, I'm going outside, and I'll be back, and I'll give you a call, to see what my place is in the line. A little Indian lady at reception said, "You cannot do that, public servants. You cannot do that. It means I can do it." So I'm outside. I've got no socks on. It's winter and I'm really cold. I call up and she said, "Oh, there's a room waiting for you." I said, "Yeah." And after that, we'll be transferring you. I said, "Oh, okay. My feet are really cold. I've got to go home and get some socks, and I'll catch you later." So they were going to section me voluntarily, and once that happens, you're in the system, and then you're involuntary sectioned. And I think it gets down to we are the chronicler. We tell stories, and in a lot of cases, I've had to set up stories in order to create a really good story. And that was one of them. It was kind of fun being sectioned almost, and then calling up saying, "What the fuck are you guys doing trying to section me?" Obviously off my head on Vyvanse, 40 milligrams, plus topped up with some phentermine, 40 milligrams. And then you get in the double dosage, and then all of a sudden you're on that borderline psychosis.
Right.
But psychosis is kind of an interesting thing. Who doesn't like listening to the water going drip, 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 and sort of, making weird noises and assumptions, It's kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's until you like get tired of it. I've experienced that with like when I was doing a lot of crack for that story. I did like 4 months for that Deviant Behavior. I like basically I had this $10,000 advance and I smoked it all. And
Great book, by
and
the
then I
way.
wrote about it. Thank
I'm
you.
the
It's
third way
finally,
through it.
it's
Sorry,
finally.
only a third way through it, but I'm really enjoying it. God,
But the thing I noticed was on the third day of staying up, you started hallucinating.
well, you see, crack versus prescription drugs. I usually just use prescription. There's a big difference, right? Big fuck.
Well, there is, but there isn't because, I've experienced auditory hallucinations behind that and all kind of stuff like that, which, like, this person I've been dealing with, they have that and they think they're being monitored and all this shit. And they're like, they're having the same thing. And it's not because of crack, it's because of, their various brain chemistry. So I think it's like, it's what the various drugs and shit do to your hypothalamus and other parts of your brain. And there is in that Deviant Behavior book, there's this chapter I fucking researched really hard. It's kind of like shows exactly what happens when the crack smoke goes into your mouth and like what's the where it goes, what's the chemistry, what happens. It's this whole involved scientific section, which I recommend you reading that part. It's really fun.
What chapter's that?
I have no idea.
Anyway, the sad news is we've got 10 fucking minutes left until I upgrade with Zoom. Go figure, yeah. Fucking go figure.
Well, we could schedule another
That'd be
time.
great, man. That'd be fantastic. Think about your writing. I'm going to go back to some points that I really found interesting and shows how cheeky you are. You're talking about Hunter Thompson, how he's been arrested, and you're at our farm and you're saying, listen, he's in his 50s and he's got a little pot gut. I mean, how did that go down well with Hunter?
I don't know. I mean, I doubt that he even read what I wrote, to be honest. Your window's kicking up behind you there.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I'll try
Nice
to
breeze, though.
Yeah, well, you
Good
want to see
breeze.
what the fuck outside. It's like a veritable farm here. Oh, fuck. I've been doing a lot of work, which has
Yeah.
been pretty fit. It's a good way to lose weight. You probably can't see, but it goes back a bit.
Yeah, it's a little blown out from the sun, but it looks nice. It's early there.
So,
So no, I mean Hunter, I'll tell you the story about Hunter. The only real like besides there's a couple interactions we had. I had the 3 weeks with him. I wrote all about it and I did an in-depth interview with a French publication about it, and it's all in my book that's called The Pope of Pot and Other Stories. And it's like a whole section of that book. There's a whole Hunter Thompson's, and if anybody's interested in that stuff, I really recommend that because that like tells exactly what it was like. I was sent out there by Rolling Stone to sort of babysit him when he was arrested,
yeah.
and by his local police, and so I spent like 3 weeks just like doing whatever he needed. I'm like, I'm here, I'll help you, and I'll just do it. So I write all about that and what our days were like, and we were doing a lot of coke and this, that, and the other.
You were doing the grinding, weren't you?
Yeah, I was well, it's this way.
Oh, that way.
It was called a Deering blender. It was kind of cute. It was like Tiffany's turquoise. I remember their whole line of products. But anyway, so Hunter and I had this experience, and then we didn't like talk on the phone a lot or anything. And then, but a few years later, I was in New York. I was writing about the Pope of Pot for Rolling Stone. And he was like the guy in the United States that had the first delivery service. Ended up getting, he thought it was like the sacrament. Pot was the sacrament. So I'm there doing a story about him. He's like getting arrested, trying to be this like weird. He's got bicycle delivery messengers all over Manhattan, and they're like 1-800-want-pot.
What a story.
And yeah, so I'm writing about that, and meanwhile Hunter is in town. Esquire magazine has hired him to do a column, and this editor of mine at Esquire, David Hershey, he's like, his job is to babysit Hunter, which Hunter needs a babysitter. So one thing he does, he would go to the hotel room and then they just start ordering all the room service, drinking everything, doing everything, you know, staying up all night, you know. It's like it was just like the crazy world of Hunter. Like, he liked chaos. He just created, he like existed in this chaotic world of anybody who's ever done coke is like, the thing about coke is, unlike speed, you need to like re-up every 15 minutes. You need another hit because you like just come down, go up, come down, go up. It's not like you stay up there like when you do all this speedy shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but anyway, so I'm staying in this old ass hotel, the Chelsea Hotel. It's where Sid and Nancy like caught on fire from that movie and stuff,
Oh, yeah, it's a
and where she
yeah.
fell over the railing and all that stuff. So anyway, I stayed. That was my hotel in New York, and I'm staying
Yeah,
there.
I read about that
It's
in your
like
article.
3 in the morning, and I get this phone call from my boy David Hershey, the editor of Esquire, and he's like, Hunter lost his ball of hash. It's like this big fucking thing. He needs for all the synergy. He's drinking, he's snorting, he needs his like weed, pot, hash, whatever. And he can't find it. And that was my memory of being with him, like, you know, like when you like lose something and then you like look all over the house and then you like forget what you're looking for. And like it's like this semi-psychotic state of being, you know,
It's
too
Fear and Loathing in Vegas.
right. So they've lost the hash. So Hershey's like, we need some pot. And it's like 3 in the morning. And I called, I'm like, okay, it's like 1980, 1990, whatever. Like, it's not like you can go down the corner and get some pot like you can here. So I'm like, okay, I got you. And I like hang up the phone. I call the Pope of Pot. I'm like, Hunter Thompson needs pot. And he dispatches a messenger on a bicycle to his hotel. And like within an hour, Hunter Thompson's got pot. So I was like legendary with Hunter, I think, for that reason alone.
Well, yeah, you still
Like,
are.
I just like,
Yeah.
it was my moment of really like, I mean, all I ever did was service Hunter. And then he was kind enough to give me a blurb, and I'm kind enough to like spend a lot of my time being like associated with like a lot what he
Yeah.
did,
Well,
which was cool. But you know, that's why we're here right now. So.
sorry. What are you associated with again? Can you repeat that?
Well, I'm just I think that like my writing is said to have the main influences of my writing, and I'd agree, were Hunter Thompson, Tom Wolfe, and this guy Gay Talese.
Hmm.
And Hunter was like, I think he was more of a fabulist than a journalist, you know, but he like
Yeah.
he wrote with this energy and this possibility, which like I downloaded that. And then Tom Wolfe, he was like an anthropological guy. He would like hang out with people, but he's kind of like a snob. He's wearing this white suit, you know. He didn't like blend in, but like so he wrote The Right Stuff and all this other coinage,
Yeah, a
all
man in
the
full, right? A man in
yeah,
full.
all this
Heard
stuff he
that.
wrote.
Yeah.
So, and then there's this other guy, Gay Talese, who started as a newspaper reporter at the New York Times, and he's very elegant and understated, and he's very much into like the notes and like just writing beautiful sentence, whereas Tom Wolfe was like into like capital letters and apostrophe, like exclamation points, and you know, doing all this crazy shit. So I'm kind of like I got the energy of one, the possibility of the other, and the elegance of the third that I've tried to put together into my own voice. And then, you know, then I'm like, you know, I do my own thing. But so that's what I got from Hunter. And
Well,
then being with Hunter was important because, you know,
we've got 2 minutes left, by the way, unfortunately.
I was a big partier, and being with Hunter like taught me about like, you know, I still smoke a lot of pot, and you know, I have a drink, but I don't like do a bunch of coke and try to do work. Like I did a bunch of coke and I just lived the coke. You know, I didn't try to like intersect like the coke with the typing, except for one time, which was a story about a pimp.
Actually, I really want to explore this in our next interview because I'm going to upload this little baby because I'm really
Go
impressed.
ahead. Well, just best to your listeners. Let's do it again.
We've got a minute, 19
I'm
seconds.
happy to meet you.
Oh, cool, man. That's what I
And
need.
thanks for like being a fan and taking the time
Yeah.
to do this.
Well, this
MikeSager.com. Anybody can find me there.
that's how I
Check
found
out
you.
also the
That's how I found this guy.
SagerGroup.net.
Yeah.
SagerGroup.net. I'm a publisher. I publish books for people, and you know, some are Pulitzer Prize winners, and some are just a guy who's never written a book before and wants to pay me to do it. I kind of like Peter pays Paul, and we like put it all together, and we make this book company. So
you want to get published, contact Mike Sager, and he's a really nice guy. He's like, he actually answers his contact the fill-in forms, and he's really, really cool like that. It's all about the writing and about sharing.
on my staff, I'm the only one here, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna talk to you about Marlon Brando, Finding Brando next. I'm really impressed with that book.
Let's do that.
And also the Carlos Castaneda one, Shaman. So we got lots to talk about, and I haven't even started yet on that shit.
Both of those are available on audiobook, by the way. If anybody's interested, there's like sound effects and music.
And also Deviant Behavior is also available on Audible.
Yeah, there's a bunch.